this time. Let's see, how did I do that? Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
I'm getting tickled by that.
By the tree.
I've been speaking at churches like this for a long time, ever since retiring from GE 18 years ago. And although I've been fine-tuning my talks over the years, in case you haven't noticed, I always talk about the same theme. If I have to give it a name, I'll call it the law of attraction. I didn't always subscribe to this philosophy, but about 40 years ago, a major event in my life, which I will call a dark night of the soul, caused me to change my thinking. And after that event, I began to have some very unusual experiences, both good and bad. These experiences seemed to be related to my thinking. And some of these experiences were so unusual that I couldn't help but notice that they were related to the thoughts that I had. As a result of my paying attention to these things, I began to notice that if my thoughts were more positive, good things would happen to me, and if my thoughts were more negative, that just the opposite would happen. But that wasn't the most startling thing. Often what manifested was very related to something I had recently been thinking about, and in fact sometimes it was exactly what I was thinking. At that time, I had not yet heard of the law of attraction. By the time I became a minister some 20 years later, I was totally convinced that this was a phenomenon that I should talk about because it could be very helpful to people, but it turns out that I still had an important lesson to learn. I believe that if you feel genuinely happy with your life, you'll find that things will just seem to click for you, and life will become easier. You may even notice that little miracles happen for you even if you aren't soliciting them. I say this because I've seen it happen in my own life. And I call this the magic of happiness, which was the subject of one of my previous talks. But it also works the other way.
Dog attraction.
I mentioned that I think he just cut me off. I think it's that connection right there.
Talk?
Hello, hello, hello.
No. Talk?
Hello.
No.
Check, check.
Try turning it. I wouldn't turn it off, it'll screech. Try turning it off and on. Hello. Wow.
I want it.
I think she just looked at it because it doesn't know what it said.
If we can't get it going, we'll just work without it.
I think that's the best idea.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go without it. It also works the other way.
Now it's working.
Oh, what, it is?
Yeah.
Test, test.
As soon
I
as you said
mentioned
it
that I
was-
still had a major lesson to learn. And in the years after 9/11, I had times when I felt very disempowered. There were constant news stories of negative events, the war, the economy, unemployment, hurricanes, high insurance rates, high gas prices, on and on. And did anyone else have a difficulty trying to manifest good things around that time? Or am I the only one? These were times when, although I practiced everything that I knew, I couldn't manifest my way out of a paper bag. In 2001, I had had my fill of relationships that didn't work out. Anybody been there?
Yes.
relationship, there are usually things that you like and things that you would change. And some things you can overlook and some things that are very important to you. Well, it seemed like every time I found someone that I thought was perfect, there was always something missing that was important to me. When I broke off one relationship, I would focus on wanting one that had what was missing in that one. And when I found it, there was always something else that was missing. Obviously, I needed to change my focus. So I decided to write down a list of what was really important to me in a relationship and to check the list regularly. I had a list of about 21 things that I considered important in a relationship, and it was shortly after that when I met my lovely wife Sharon. I checked my list. Yep. Number 1. Yep. Number 2. Yep. It was all there. I can hardly believe it. We were married 2 years later, and we just had our 12th anniversary a few weeks ago, which was a record for both of us. That was for sure the best thing I ever manifested. I believe that this idea of writing things down is a very good technique for manifesting what you want, but you need to be perfectly clear and don't leave any loopholes. I had a friend once who was wanting, this has never done this before, was wanting a sum of money to get her life in order. She was pretty clear about what she wanted, and it was the money. She went to a psychic who told her this was a lucky time for her and she should probably buy a lottery ticket or something. She got really excited. She ran off to the Hard Rock Casino to win her fortune. She was in such a big hurry and very excited as she ran in the entrance. As it turned out, they had just polished their floor, and she slipped and fell and hurt herself quite badly. Well, she ended up in the hospital and sued the casino. She got the exact amount of money she was wanting, however, most of it went to the doctors and lawyers. So be careful what you ask for and think it through carefully. Now, over the years, as I've been speaking about this, most of the lessons have included at least 2 or 3 of my personal stories about wonderful things that have happened to me, and usually within one day of having a thought or a feeling about something that I wanted. I must have 100 of these stories, although I've never bothered to count how many. And I've talked to you for years about creating miracles in your life, but many of you have asked, okay, your stories about your experiences are interesting, but how do I do it? Apparently it's hard for some people to see themselves in my stories. So this time, I'm going to try to put you into the story. I'm going to start by giving you what will seem like a really dumb example. But bear with me and it may start to make sense. Pretend with me that you're having this experience and see how you feel about it, and we'll talk about it later. Imagine that you're relaxing at home and you have a thought that you would really like to have a peanut butter and chocolate ice cream cone. And for a moment, you sit there imagining how good that would taste. Then suddenly there's a knock on your door and you open the door to a stranger who says, "Hi, I just happen to be in the neighborhood and I have this extra peanut butter and chocolate ice cream cone. Do you know anybody who wants one?" Okay, I know what you're thinking. This is a really dumb sounding example. But as dumb as it sounds, it's exactly the kind of experience that I'm talking about. And any of you who have not heard any of the stories that I tell, you'll just have to take my word for that. But for right now, what would you think if it happened to you? Would you say, "Gee, that was a funny coincidence"? Or maybe you might be inclined to hold up a crucifix and say, "Be gone, Satan, I know your tricks." That's not the way that I would respond. I'll tell you how I would respond. I would accept the gift, and then I would get goosebumps. I would feel my body was vibrating. I would be shaking from the thought that I had just had a divine experience. And I would pay attention to it and ask myself, how did I create that? Now, let's look at this example. Assuming that it happened to you, which might be hard for you to do, but just for the moment. You could have gone through your whole life without someone offering you an ice cream cone in that manner, but it happened. And it happened right after you had that thought. And not only that, but it was your favorite flavor. And that's the kind of experience that I'm talking about. Now, many of the stories I've shared in my talks have been even more complicated and seemingly less likely to happen than this one. But the Course in Miracles says there's no order of difficulty in miracles. One is not harder or bigger than another. So it really comes down to what you think is too much to ask. What do you think is not realistic? What is the limit that you can believe in? What are you ready to accept? I believe that God wants us to be happy. Is it not written that it is the Father's great pleasure to give you the kingdom? Luke 12:32. Maybe you prefer that I use the term spirit. Okay, so spirit wants you to be happy. Is it not also written, as a man thinketh, so is he? Proverbs 23:7. This is just another way of stating the law of attraction. You get what you focus on. So it follows that what shows up in your life is a reflection of what you believe. So I'm going to talk about how to manifest what you want in your life. Before I begin, I want to be clear about two things. The first is that I'm not a master of this principle. I don't pick diamond rings out of thin air like Sai Baba. I'm still learning it like everyone else, but I've discovered that I can learn about it by just paying attention to my experiences. The second thing is that what we think of as miracles are not supernatural. They don't defy any natural laws. The Course in Miracles says that miracles are natural. When they don't happen, something has gone wrong. Why don't you turn that off? So we need to figure out what's gone wrong and make it right. And what is wrong is your thinking. There's no easy, quick solution for most people because it means changing the way you think on a full-time basis. And that isn't easy for most people because we spend a lifetime creating our thought habits. But it's a very worthwhile pursuit, and there's no time like the present to begin. Now, prayer is a good start, and it's been proven to be spectacular in many cases, but I'm going to tell you that it isn't the most important part. The most effective part is the way you think throughout the rest of your day. You can do the most perfect prayer and then cancel and negate it by filling your mind with thoughts that you don't deserve what you're asking for and it's impossible and it can never happen to you. There are many different ways to pray. I believe that they are all more or less effective. But prayer is the act of setting your mind in such a way as to trap an experience of the divine. That's important. I want to say that again. Prayer is the act of setting your mind in such a way as to trap an experience of God or the divine. But after you have set your mind in the right state, then the hard part begins. You have to believe in your goal. I'm not going to take the time to talk about the many different ways to pray, maybe some other time, but I want to talk about what you do the rest of your day when you're not consciously praying. Maybe it's more important what you don't do. If If you have a tendency to think negatively about yourself or your goal, you can easily cancel your prayer. If you think you're not worthy, or your goal is not realistic, or you're not good enough, or nothing good ever happens to you, the law of attraction will kick in and gladly give you what you're focusing on. As you believe, so it is done unto you. Okay, I'm going to tell you just one of my stories. A couple of you may have heard me tell this one before, and I apologize for that, but it's a good example to compare with the peanut butter and chocolate ice cream story that I made up earlier. That's why I chose this particular story. If you thought, when we were talking about that, if you felt like there was no way that could happen to you, and it was a completely preposterous story, very unlikely, then just wait till you hear this story. This is a true story. It also illustrates another point that I want to make, and that is that sometimes it isn't even necessary to have a conscious prayer at all, if you just hold the right attitude. In 1999, I started a Course in Miracles group at the church where I was ordained, and during the first meeting of the study group, I asked the participants to share with the rest of the group if any miraculous or coincidental things happened to them while they were a member of this group. I don't know why I was prompted to say that. I didn't really expect anybody was going to bring in any great miracle stories right away. After all, it takes time to learn this stuff, right? Well, that was my belief anyway. But life can be full of surprises, and on the third class night, 2 members of the group came in with a terrific story that knocked our socks off. There was a young couple in the group that had recently begun dating, and they were very much in love. John and Cheryl were each divorced and in the process of creating a new relationship with each other. Cheryl had become very interested in A Course in Miracles, and John was there because he had become very interested in Cheryl. And in fact, John was willing to do anything to demonstrate his love for Cheryl. They came to the group with a story to tell, and John seemed very emotional as he began to tell this account of what had happened the day before. It seems that Cheryl had become distressed about the rundown condition of her home, particularly her landscape, which made her look really bad next to her neighbors. It was worn out and dying. So John decided that he needed to come to the rescue and revitalize her yard. Now, John was not a person of means, but he had determination, and he had an old truck. So John stated his intention to replant her yard, even though he wasn't exactly sure how he was going to do it. Now, the day before our third meeting, John had taken off work early so that he could get started on fulfilling his promise. He owned a piece of property in St. Petersburg that had a few plants on it, and he figured he could dig those up and transplant them to Cheryl's place, and that would be a start, and he'd show that he meant business. Before I get too far, I should tell you that John had been thinking a lot lately about an old friend of his from high school, whose name was also John. They were very close in high school, and he said, I wonder what old John is doing these days. I haven't talked to him in years. So John made a mental note to try to look up his friend as soon as he had a chance. Meanwhile, back in the truck, John found himself dragging through a rundown part of South St. Petersburg where he would not normally drive, and at a time where he certainly wouldn't be likely to be there because he rarely took off work early. Now, this was not an area where John was comfortable stopping, but he noticed that he was almost out of gas. He would be even more uncomfortable running out of gas in this place. So, fighting against his uneasiness, he stopped at a small neighborhood convenience store where he would not normally be at a time when he would not normally be there. And John only casually noticed that he pulled up alongside of a landscaping truck. You're starting to get the picture here. He filled his tank and he went inside to pay. Inside the store, what do you suppose? His old friend John. What an amazing surprise. Oh, of course we knew that was coming, didn't we? John, old buddy, I've been thinking about you. How have you been? What have you been up to? Oh, hey man, everything's great. I'm in the landscaping business now. That's my truck out there. By the way, I have a whole truckload of beautiful plants that I just removed from a lady's yard. Do you know anybody who'd want them? was stunned. His goosebumps had goosebumps. That day, John was given everything he needed to fulfill his promise to Cheryl in one fell swoop and totally free. John and Cheryl could hardly wait to come to the group the next day to tell the story. John was visibly shaken by the experience. He said he was a mixture of happy and confused, and he was feeling a strange buzz in his body, like an energy that he'd never felt before. I wonder whether some of you may have had this kind of an experience.
Oh, yeah.
Just for fun, the group decided to estimate the odds of this happening. For instance, what were the odds of him leaving work that particular day? What were the odds of him being in that part of town at that exact time? What were the odds of him running out of gas at that time? And what were the odds of his friend being there at that exact time? And what were the odds of his friend having the plants he needed that day, et cetera, et cetera? And we estimated that John would have had a better chance of winning the lottery than to have this happen. Wasn't that an impressive story? It's a true story. There were a dozen people there that heard it. And I know that many of you probably have stories like this to share, and I hope that you will share them with me. I'd love to hear them. But now, how did John create this situation? He didn't give any thought to prayer at all. But John had a lot going for him. He had will, intention, determination, and action, and an intense love for Cheryl. He also had something else going on. He was happy. Notice that John created this miraculous event without praying at all, at least as far as he knew. The point is that our every thought is a prayer to the law of attraction, and he never doubted that he would be successful. So this illustrates two things. First, that our continual state of mind may be more powerful than a momentary prayer. And second, that it may be very powerful just to be happy. The magic of happiness. You can choose to be happy no matter what's going on in your life. You can be grateful for what you have. I'm going to give you an example of how you can transform your attitude to help you create what you want instead of what you don't want. Just one little small example. Let's suppose, imagine that things aren't going well for you on your job. Anybody been there? You know the feeling. You're over it. You decided it's time to move on. So you decide to manifest a new job. You've done all the things that the books and videos say to do, but nothing's happening. Let's also suppose that you spend a lot of time complaining to people about your job. According to the law of attraction, if you're focusing a lot on being unhappy in your job, you're going to create more of being unhappy in your job. That means you probably aren't going to create that new job, or if you do, it'll be another job that you're unhappy with. So it may seem like you're caught in a vicious cycle, but hold on, you don't have to be there. No matter how bad your job is, there must be a few things that you can appreciate about it. Maybe you like some of the people you work with. Or maybe you might feel grateful that you just have a job when so many people are being laid off, or etc. Well, here's another approach to this situation, another way that you could think about that situation. You could think, there are many things I like about this job, and I'm happy with it. I'm happy here. However, I know I can do better than this, and I know that there's a perfect job waiting for me, and I'm going to find it. Getting any idea? In this last example, I talked about complaining. So I want to take this opportunity to call your attention to this purple bracelet that I'm wearing. My church bought these from an organization called the Complaint-Free World. The idea is that whenever you complain about something, you have to transfer the bracelet to the other wrist. You can spend all day just doing this. It trains you to become aware of your complaining, and it helps you to quit, and it actually works. I hope I've given you something useful. I can't change your thinking for you. That's your job. But if you can learn to be happy and grateful and avoid complaining, you'll go a long way toward brightening your life. So don't worry, be happy. Happy holidays, and I leave